The nation is just a few weeks away from the May 29 elections, and there's a lot of hype and expectation as the historic day arrives. Now, in this context, South Africans now have a report on the cost and scope of what the last 30 years of freedom have meant. Well, this morning, we are continuing with our election decoding, and joining us in studio today is leader of the African Transformation Movement, Mr. Vuyo Zungula. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, Naledi, and morning to everyone watching.
I think a good place to start is we are just a few weeks away to the elections. This is the second time that the ATM will be, I suppose, competing in the general elections. You did so in 2019. Are you optimistic? At the moment, you've got 2 seats in the National Assembly. What's the goal for post-29 May?
We're definitely going to grow as a party. 2019, many people did not know what we stand for and what we can contribute in our body politics. But 5 years later, people have realized the importance of ATM and how ATM has been patriotic, bold, decisive, and has been solutions-driven. So for the past 5 years, people have seen that, the kind of politics that ATM is bringing is the kind of politics that is needed in the country, not politics of personalities or personalities of and just playing around, but politics of just focusing on the problems, providing solutions to the problems, and having, a greater view in terms of working together with other opposition parties for the greater good.
Yeah, I said you've got 2 seats at the moment. What's your goal?
We've got 2 seats. We are in these elections to win it. We are not in these elections to retain 2 seats. We are in these elections for the sole purpose of winning elections, because that is what South Africa needs, honestly. Because if South Africa, goes back to the same ruling party, the same thing that is happening now is going to happen, which is there's going to be increase in crime, unemployment, poverty. So what South Africans definitely need now, it is for the ATM government to come into power and have the ATM solutions, changing their lives.
Okay, so not a clear number, but you're going out for an all-out win. This is after holding only 2 seats in the current National Assembly. Do you feel that the electorate understands the African Transformation Movement and what the ATM stands for? Certainly its beginnings. I mean, there's a lot of questions around who's the founder of ATM?
The founder of the ATM is the South African Council of Messianic Churches, which is the combination or the coming together of different churches, different also royal houses who came together and said, let us have a party that will represent our interests. So that is who the ATM was founded by in 2018.
And prior to that, was there no, sort of discussions prior to 2018 around the formation of the ATM and its intention?
Discussion with who?
Anyone about the formation of the party?
So even though the party was formed in 2018 when it comes to the IEC registration, but these different leaders from these churches and royal houses have had discussions for many years prior, discussing as to what is the state of the country, what should they do, instead of just sitting back and allowing the country, to be a failed state.
The reason why I asked that question is because you have, for years now, needed to dust off the perception that ATM was founded really as part of the vision of former President Jacob Zuma. And it certainly doesn't help that when you speak to one of the people that considers himself to be I suppose, who says that ATM is one of their brainchilds. Is it Chief Apostle of the 12 Apostles of Christ Church, Caesar Ngunga, who says that he knows of a vision of the 12 Apostles Christ Church that goes back in the 70s to unite the ANC and PAC into an African Transformation Congress, wherein President Jacob Zuma was involved in those talks. I mean, how does that link up to ATM today?
What the Professor Nongunga was speaking about was information that was contained in the Diary of the Apostles, diary which actually speaks to a prophecy that was had during that time as to how some of these African indigenous churches need to play their role in terms of trying to free South Africa, instead of religious organizations just wanting to stay in church and not contribute towards making South Africa better. And particularly the context at the time, it was when, South Africans, particularly black South Africans, were oppressed. So that was the context of them with the different leaders of the different parties back then with the assistance of these churches. And remember, these churches also contributed towards taking some of these ANC people, PAC people to exile, because that is where most of their support was coming from. But when it comes to now the implementation or the formation of the ATM in 2018, it was these churches who got together and said, let us form our own organization that will represent our interests.
So, but the former President Jacob Zuma was in that vision of the 70s, correct?
In the 70s, there were quite a number of players that were there, as detailed in the diary. So a lot of players were involved from the PAC, from other people from the ANC. So a lot of people were involved in those discussions.
Do you feel that ATM has in any way been abandoned by some of the bigger names that were a part of the movement? I mean, what do you make of the likes of Mzwanele Manyi leaving the ranks of ATM to go and join the EFF? Does the ATM feel deserted by Mr. Manyi? And then even this assertion that there may be some link to the former President Jacob Zuma and the fact that he's gone to go start the MK party. Is there a sense that the ATM has been left to fend for itself?
The ATM was formed with the sole intention of transforming our country. So the people who came, like Mr. Mzwanele Manyi, joined the party, and like many people do, they change parties. He's not the first and the last one to leave the party, and ATM is not the first party whereby people change their political party. So we don't feel abandoned, because the ATM has grown from 2019 up until now. If you look at the results of 2021 elections, they show growth. If you look at how many communities are actually inviting us now to go and address them and work together, for them to work together with the ATM, that is signaling growth. So we as a party, we don't feel abandoned, because again, we are not anchored on certain personalities. We are anchored on a certain vision, which is to transform our country. So we do understand the nature of people joining and leaving organizations.
Okay. And of course, what does your membership look like at the moment?
We've not done an audit as yet.
So what the last audit that you had, how big was the membership of the ATM?
No, we've never done an audit as a party.
So you don't have any clear numbers on the membership of your party?
Not at all.
So depending on how many seats you get, how long does your list look like then, your candidate list?
We are contesting all 9 provinces, the national ballot, so all of those lists, we filled them to capacity. So that is clearly showing that we do have candidates across the country, across the different provinces. But when it comes to now actually doing a membership audit, we've not done so as a party, because we wanted to utilize our scarce resources towards building the organization. And we felt that there are more things that are a priority, which is, for example, having community projects whereby we're opening houses, we're building houses for people, we're building community gardens for people. That is what we thought is a priority for us as a party.
But without a membership audit, how do you then decide who's the leader of the party?
We've not had a conference as yet. We are going to have all of those conferences after these elections. We've never had a conference because we're in the founding stages. In the founding stages, we do not want to become like other parties whereby we rush into having conferences that would lead to conflict or divisions in a party. We've had a policy conference whereby we discuss what policies that are needed to take the country forward, but we've not reached a stage yet where we're going to have an elective conference whereby we are going to change leadership. Okay,
so I mean, perhaps it's interesting then that we start talking about the sort of policies that the ATM aligns itself with, right? There's the expectation that you're not going to be supporting the DA's multi-party charter and that your policies lean more towards that of the ANC and the EFF. Would you agree with that?
I would say the reason why we're not part of the multi-party charter pact, it is because when there was a discussion in Parliament with opposition parties, all opposition parties, we made a submission as an ATM to say the country needs any working together of opposition parties that is pro-South Africa, not coming together of opposition parties that are anti a certain party. What the DA has led, it is anti-certain parties and definitely not pro-South Africa. So that is why we could not find ourselves in any arrangement that is not about the people, that is not people-centric. Secondly, if you look at how that arrangement is, it is not about the parties coming together on an equal footing and discussing what is needed to take the country forward. Rather, it is the DA enticing parties with money, saying we are going to lead this particular arrangement. So our policies, we've correctly articulated them in the past 5 years, are more on transforming the economy, transforming our legal framework, transforming our townships. So our policies are centered around transformation of our country.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break and we'll continue our conversation on the other side of that. And on the other side of it, in fact, we'll start talking about more of their policies, that being the African Transformation Movement. They're calling for the return of the death penalty. We'll find out why, and also just get their view on how South Africa is dealing with the Para scandal. All of that and more on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we continue with our conversation with the leader of the African Transformation Movement, or ATM, Vuyo Zungula, who is in studio with us. And of course, feel free to share your thoughts on the discussion, questions perhaps that you may have for him. Do X us at Newzroom 405. It is the feature called Ask a Politician. So we really want to hear your questions for the leaders that we bring to you in the run-up to these all-important elections. I want to talk about your policy proposal. You've talked about bringing back the death penalty. Why? What will that do?
Look, the reality that we have in the country is that, number one, the crime rate, it is very high, especially the murder rate. If 85 people are murdered every day, that is spelling one thing, that there is a death penalty in our country, but it is a death penalty for innocent, law-abiding citizens. We're of the view as a party that we need to have a strong retribution when it comes to criminals, that criminals in our country cannot be treated with kid gloves. Criminals in our country, we can't say we need to respect their right to life, whereas they themselves are not respecting their right to life of other people. We've got a case now of a Lesotho immigrant who was caught. I think he was killed a few days ago, and he was involved reportedly that he was involved in the killing of 29 people. So we are saying as the ATM, there are extenuating circumstances whereby the death penalty must be utilized as a means of retribution. What we're not saying that the automatic sentence for a person that is killed is a death penalty. We're saying there are extenuating circumstances for heinous crimes that the death penalty should be the appropriate sentence. For example, if you are going to be killing 29 people, if you are going to be raping a lot of women, if you are going to be terrorizing communities, therefore that is what needs to be done. However, it is not, we're not just saying that is the only solution. We're saying that over and above that, there needs to be other things that are done. For example, we want to say as a party that there needs to be employment of all of the police reservists so that we boost the police to citizen ratio, because currently it is sitting at 1 to 400 citizens, whereas the recommended ratio by the United Nations, it is 1 to 235. Secondly, those policemen need to be adequately trained so that we don't have cases whereby they can't solve cases, they can't solve murders, because last year 27,000 people were killed, but only 3,000 murders were actually solved. So that leaves close to 24,000 that were actually not solved. So that is why we're speaking about training. However, one of the unfortunate realities that we have in our country is that you also have policemen that are working with criminals. That is why when you go to communities, you speak about bringing in the police. Communities will tell you do not want police here because police are working with criminals. So that is why also advocating that any policeman that is involved in corruption, in wrongdoing and working with criminals, they need to be sentenced with a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So what we're actually advocating for, it is an entire overhaul of our criminal justice system. And then when it comes to now the heinous and extraneous cases of criminality, death penalty must be utilized.
Oh, that's a big overhaul. I want to move on because we don't have a lot of time and I'm trying to get as much done as possible. You've claimed that you have received death threats on the back of the Para burglar scandal. What happened?
It's a case of me receiving an SMS from individuals, different individuals or different numbers saying that you need to watch your bag or, you've made your bed, you must lie on it. So we've reported all of those SMSs to the Goodwood police station. Unfortunately, nothing has come out of those investigations that were done by the police.
Do you believe that this Para scandal is getting the attention that it should be by South African authorities?
Not at all, not at all. Precisely because we're of the view that the most independent work that was done, it was done by the independent the Section 9 independent panel done by Parliament. When it comes to the other institutions, what is wrong in our country is that majority of these people from your SARS, your Hawks, your Chapter 9 institutions, they are appointed by the very same president they needed to investigate. So that is why you find that Reserve Bank is going to issue a report to say there's nothing wrong with a president not declaring foreign currency because he was not legally entitled to it because the sale was not concluded. That was the first time ever that we've seen a Reserve Bank saying that you as a holder, because a sale was not concluded, you were not supposed to be having it, so there was no obligation on your side. Similarly, when it comes to the public protector saying that it's not paid work for Mr. Ramaphosa to actually be involved in determining the price, determining which animals to be sold, whereas the definition of paid work by the independent panel is a person that gives his mental effort into a running of a business. On the other side, the public protector wants to confine that to physical presence, which does not make any form of sense, especially now in the light of the world working virtually, whereby you can be in Cape Town but do work for a company in Limpopo. But for the public protector, she confined it that you need to be physically there. So in our view, the court cases that we've taken to court on this particular issue is the one that is going to save the country by making sure that whoever that becomes president must be held accountable. And most importantly, you don't have cases whereby the people that are appointed by the president utilize their positions to protect the president from being held accountable. Yeah,
I mean, you did, of course, last year file an application with the Pretoria High Court to review the findings by the public protector, Kollega Galeka, on Parapara in July last year. So what is your idea then on how we improve the integrity? And you say you question the integrity of our Chapter 9 institutions. What does that need to look like, the improvement thereof?
They must be held accountable. At the same time, what needs to happen is that Parliament, which comprises of different political parties, need to have a greater voice in terms of the appointment of such Chapter 9 institutions, so that we don't have institutions that are dependent on the executive. Because once those institutions, their appointment or their suspension is dependent on the executive alone, what you're going to find that those institutions are going to lean towards being lenient towards the executive instead of doing their work in accordance to what the Constitution requires.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your coalition sort of plans post the 29th of May. Which political parties have you been in conversation with? Have you been in conversation at all with the MK party?
We have not been in conversation with any political party, and our view on a coalition as the ATM is to say there needs to be a program of action that is saying, in light of the challenges that we face as a country, this is what needs to happen. This is what needs to be done. We need to have a stronger border management. We need to transform the economy. The mineral wealth of the country needs to be owned by the state, and we need to locally process the minerals. We need to have a skills-based education system. We need to have an agricultural revolution whereby one household, one farm is an order of the day. And then once we decide on the program of action, then we get now parties who are agreeing on what needs to be done, deciding to form a coalition. Because once you lead with a program of action, you are putting the interests of the people first and you are resolving the problems of the country. But once you start by saying we are going to work together as a party, as parties, then it becomes an afterthought to say, okay, what must be done for the benefit of the people? So we are saying as Tina, as a party, the people must come first by a program of action. Because currently we've got a problem in the local municipalities whereby there's collision with parties, but you find that one party believes in state capacity and the other party believes more in privatization. So that is why there's going to be a conflict of ideas as to what needs to be done. Yeah. So we do not want to go that route as
I think that's obviously the politically correct answer that you're going to give me. But once we hit the Results Operations Centre in Midrand, the scrambling is going to be taking place. And the deal signing and shaking of hands will be taking place on the floor immediately. And policies may not necessarily be such a big discussion. What do you make? I mean, again, we talked earlier about how former President Jacob Zuma, and you say, was never a part of forming the African transformation movement, but you do concede that to some of the early visionaries of ATM had wanted to sit and had envisioned President Jacob Zuma as a part of the formation of the African Transformation Congress. And those were discussions, of course, pre-1994. But now you're ATM. What do you make of the former president's role in the MK party? Do you think it's going to have an impact on this election? And what would your relationship look like then with the party moving forward? Surely you've given that some thought.
Yeah, let me go back to what the diary entails. The diary entails that a lot of different leaders in the ANC, including the likes of Utatu Tambo, were involved in the discussion with these churches on what needs to be done. So it was not confined to an individual, which is Mr. Zuma, but it was a lot of leaders within the ANC. Now, coming back now to your question as to our view as a party is to say we are focusing on our policies, on speaking to the electorate. We do not want to involve ourselves in the politics of other parties because those other parties are also, focusing on their mandate and, getting the electorate to vote for them. So our view is we are going to focus on campaigning, getting the electorate to understand our message based on our policies, because it is our policies that is speaking to their lived realities.
Okay.
Now, what's going to happen after the elections, like I stated, it is going to be based on a program of action that is in the interest of the people.
But what do you make of the MK party entering the political sphere?
Just like all other parties, many parties have entered the political space and they are getting support, which is a good thing for democracy when people are represented by whoever they feel is best suited to represent them.
Okay, well, the feature that we're having this morning is called Ask a Politician, and really it's an opportunity for you to send in a video, and you can do so on X at Newzroom405, asking a question to our politician that we speak to for the morning. And we've got one video already from a Mr. Gerber.
Yeah, so I think my question to politicians would be, how do we trust you? I think we've seen over the past 30 years, and I'm only 23 years old now, but I think ever since I can remember, we've heard promises, we've heard news saying, we're going to build these amount of houses, we're going to make sure that there's running water in your house, we're going to make sure that you have good living conditions. But I think, as is clear in so many areas, there's no services, there's no good living conditions. So my question will be, how do we trust you?
Yeah. His name is Stefan Gerber, and he's one of the viewers that's, at least to South Africans, that's sent in a question. I think it's a simple question. All of us have that question. Why should we trust you?
We've proven ourselves as an ATM. From 2019, our manifesto, when we go to Parliament, we stuck to our manifesto. And most importantly, in these past 5 years, we've shown that we can be bold, we are patriotic, and we've got the decisiveness that is required, to challenge the problems that we have. So if people can look at the performance and the contribution of the ATM in Parliament, with only 2 seats, we've managed to do something that is not even done by the official opposition, simply because we have been bold and we have been focusing on the principles. So people must just observe ATM based on its contribution in the past 5 years.
And speaking of that contribution, I think a really great place for us to close it off is over the past 5 years, we have seen a party with only 2 seats in the National Assembly take on parties that have very massive representation in the National Assembly. You've got this election, the likes of independent candidates that are vying for 1 seat in the National Assembly. And there's the question, well, what is that 1 seat going to make? What do you say to those compatriots that are also vying for 1 seat, 2 seats in the National Assembly, and to the pundits who say it makes no difference, your existence in the National Assembly is insignificant because of how tiny your representation is?
When you are elected, regardless whether they've got 1 or 2 seats, you are given a mandate by the citizens to represent them. So you need now, as a member of Parliament, even if it's 1 or 2 seats, take that mandate seriously and utilize the powers that we have and the opportunities that we have in Parliament to represent the people that elected you. Put in motions, because, if parties were not supposed to put motions because there's only 1 seat, it means there's only 1 party in Parliament that could have put motions. It's the one with the majority. But we see motions from all different parties, regardless whether they've got 80 seats, 40 seats, or 2 seats. So what is important for you, just stick to the mandate of the people, represent the people, and do not confine yourself to the noise of the bigger parties. Stay true to your mandate, the mandate that you've been given by your voters. Okay.
Are you at liberty to disclose with us who's funding you and perhaps to how much?
We've been funded by our members. As a party, since 2019, All of our members have been funding us through donations, membership fees, and that is how we've managed to stay independent, because if you check how ATM has remained independent, it is largely because there's no funder that is dictating to us what to say and what not to say. Look at the rand manipulation scandal. We're the forefront of it. We're the forefront of exposing Phala. We're the forefront of, challenging that there needs to be special task forces that are deployed by the government to deal with illegal mining, drug trafficking, the porous borders, simply because there's no one that is dictating to us what needs to be said. What drives us as a party is basically what is in the interest of the people. If the people are finding a certain issue problematic, trust ATM to take up that issue with their respective powers that be.
Okay. Mr. Vuyo Zungula is the president of the African Transformation Movement. At the moment, they sit with 2 seats in the National Assembly, 1 in KZN Legislature, 1 in Eastern Cape Legislature, and they're vying for your vote on the 29th of May. Share your thoughts with us on X at Newzroom 405.